Hello, my Facebook family and friends. I just wanted to say Merry Christmas and season's greetings to you all. I just wanted to share just something, an experience I had just recently. It really started off by just going back and like reminiscing or thinking back of earlier part of this year. As everybody is experiencing, you all know 2020 has been a year. But for me, I just had to go back on this journey, and it was a celebration of the how the year started. For me, it started in really Jerusalem. We got to go on. I got a, as most of you know, that God had blessed me with a couple that took me on a trip with them, and we went on a pilgrimage to Jerusalem, which was the most extraordinary experience I've ever had. I can't even begin to just tell you the just the extraordinary wealth that I gained from going on that trip. But I'll just say this. I was looking at a video at our daily audio Bible, a previous video where we were ending the trip and everybody got to share, of our different experiences out there. And I remember sharing my testimony, and it was actually something that I shared from the beginning part of the trip, which was we started off in Ashdod. And when we were there, I had just an amazing experience. My first, I think it was the first official day of being there. And the Spirit of God just came upon me and sort of reminded me of an experience that I had with Greg, with my husband. And it was something simple. He reminded me of when Greg and I first started dating, the thing that Greg said that made or had him decide that, you know what, I'm going to make her my wife. The experience was when I shared with him the qualities that I'm looking for in a husband or a mate or someone that I want to spend the rest of my life with. And the main thing that I said was that I desired to have the kind of love like Jesus had, where it was an undying love, an unselfish love. It was the scripture that stood out to me is no greater love than a man than to lay down his life for a friend. And as I was sharing that, I didn't realize that at that time that meant and spoke volumes to him. And he had made that choice from that very moment that I was going to be his bride. So because of that statement and because he saw my heart, from then on, it wasn't long afterwards that he took me and he took me to his home in Lafayette, and he introduced me to his family, and he did all this. So when God reminded me of that at this very point in time, he just allowed me to see where I was, and that was in Jerusalem. And he said to me, I'm your first husband. And when he said that, the revelation came forth. I mean, it was so profound because he brought me and made he gave me a special gift of an all expense paid trip that no one knew that was my heart's desire, that this couple, God administered to them for them to sow that seed and bless me, and paid for that entire trip for 2 weeks on a pilgrimage, a first class trip. Let me tell you, I knew it was God. It was utterly amazing. And the fact that when I got there and he gave me that experience and just reminded me of my husband, then he just showed me that I'm your first husband. I'm doing the same thing. I'm just showing you the same thing. And it just correlated with the fact that he brought me to his home, his land, his holy land. And And it was like a showing off, like I'm introducing you here and I'm showing you where I grew up. And it's, oh my God, it was utterly amazing. And from that, I remember saying to the group, this trip to me shows the profound love of God. It's like it tells the greatest love story. It tells from all the places we went and we visited it, from the very beginning of the trip, walking into, coming closer into the Holy Land to Jerusalem, starting on pretty much the border where the children of Israel entered into the Holy Land when they made their pilgrimage and their journey from Egypt. So it was so extraordinary, so amazing. And God just began to just show me the entire story and just open it up like extraordinary, like a flower. But it was just showing his love and his passion for the nation of Israel, and how he brought them from Egypt and brought them through everything that he's brought them through the Red Sea and all the different experiences. I mean, I was just totally in awe the entire trip. But the entire revelation to me was the love of a husband for his bride. And that was what God gave me through that trip. That was my experience, was the amazing love story. And the fact that he loved me so much to show me his home, to show me, it was like showing off like my husband did. It was just so, anyway. So I had this experience. That was a few nights ago. The next morning I got up. When I got up, I was in worship and praise, because it was like it was just such an amazing experience the night before to revisit that place and to feel the joy and to see all my DOB, my daily audio Bible brothers and sisters. It was like a family. It was so beautiful. Again, I cannot express the the wealth that it was a wealth is what I call it. And we learned so much. The Bible came alive. The men and women, we were family. We were like a family. So like I said, I had that experience. Then the next morning I got up, and when I got up, I just began to worship God for that experience. And that morning after my prayer and worship, I got up, and normally I don't open the windows and the blinds and everything. I take some time out and get dressed and do different things. So that's usually nothing. By the time I decide to open up the window, it's usually by the time I'm leaving the room and moving around the house. But to this day, I just felt so impressed to just open it up and just spend just time sitting and listening. And when I did that, I could hear the birds outside singing. And that was a little bit different for me, because I never stopped and took enough time to pay attention. But it was like they were singing sort of loud. And as they were singing, I could hear them really loudly. And a song came into my spirit, a song I hadn't heard since I was my early 20s, maybe. It's been well, I've heard it here and there, but since that was one of my favorite songs, so I hadn't really heard the entire song for a long time. And when that song hit my spirit, I went back to listen to it. And when it spoke volumes to me, when I heard it, it's called "Everything You Touch" is a song. It's by the Winans. So I knew when he gave that to me that it was an experience, and he was speaking to me, because in the song it says, "Everything you touch is a song. You touch my life one day," and says, "All my burdens, they just rolled away." Said, "You touch the birds, and that's a song." And the birds begin to sing. Dee-dee-dee-dee-dee is what the song says. "You touch the lion, and he roared." And everything you touch is a song. And those words it stood out to me so, especially because as that song was singing and meditating, I was meditating on it, I'm hearing the birds singing. And I just began to realize that everything in creation sings. Everything, the wind, the trees, they sway back and forth. They do a dance, but they sing everything because it's a praise. So from that experience, like I said, it started the night before of my appreciation for the love story. And I began to worship that morning. And then I began to hear the birds sing. And it was as though 2020, we talk about 2020 like it was like a new revelation of the peace of no matter what we're going through, that you could still have that peace, and you could still sing through this. And no matter what you go through in life, you could still sing, you could still dance, you could still live, because it's a blessing. It was a blessing to sit and hear the birds sing. But that's not where it ends. What happened after that was the reminder. God reminded me, because it was like a lot of reminders bringing me back. And he reminded me of the story that I had, or the dream that I had years and years ago. I'm going to try to make this short. But in the dream I had, it was 20, maybe 24 years ago, 20 some years, 24 years ago, because I had the dream, and my son was an infant. He was a baby. And in the dream, I remember being in a classroom setting. And in this classroom setting, we were sitting and listening to this man. And I realized and I recognized that he was an angel. But the classroom setting, it was so confusing to me because I wasn't used to, I didn't think of heaven that way. At first, I didn't even know where I was. Because there was a little something happened before that. And then, bam, I was in this place, in this classroom setting. And I recall everything in the classroom setting. First off, anything that any questions that we had, we thought of the questions, and they were being answered by our thoughts. We never opened our mouths to ask the questions. We just thought them, and the angel would answer. And it was a bunch of people in the classroom, but I remember being there and just fascinated by everything, because the only time I remember physically speaking is when I would say, oh, it was like that was all my answers to everything. But when I got out of the dream, I remember every detail of that dream. This and something else that I'll repeat in a moment. I remember every part of it, but I don't remember any of the questions that was being asked. It was as though those were shut down to me, because they weren't supposed to go beyond that atmosphere. They were like, I knew this is what I did know in my spirit, that they were questions that we always had being on the earth, but they were like mysteries, like things that we just don't have any knowledge of. They were being taught in this classroom. So we left this classroom setting and moved to where we knew we were moving, to the praise and worship area. So it was like a sanctuary area, and we were in this huge hallway, and it was like a T. And as we were moving this way, you have the T that crosses this way. So we're moving this way, the T crossed this way. And as we looked at the T, I remember looking and being really puzzled of why everybody was moving so quickly. They were moving like the speed of light. They were moving like this. And people were going back and forth, back and forth. But they weren't just people. I recognized some of them as being angels. Some were short, like small, and they had wings. They were like cherubims and seraphims. I just knew that part because they were different. Some were huge and tall with wings. Some didn't have wings. The smaller ones had wings, and they were just different beings. And I remember thinking, I never said it, where's everybody going so fast? And all of a sudden, it was as though this cherubim or seraphim, I'm not exactly sure, he went like this. So he was moving that quickly, and then he just appeared in front of me, in the front of my face. And he said, don't you know that we're preparing for the children of God to come home? And then that he answered me physically. I mean, he answered me by speech, answered my thoughts. And that was when I physically said, oh, wow. And I was just, like I said, fascinated. So we went into this classroom set, into the praise and worship area. And as we went into this area, I remember sitting on this bench. It was like I guess, a bench, sort of like pew. It was like a pew area. And I couldn't say that I physically saw God at that time. I was just fascinated. And the thing that came to me that I heard, first thing I did is when I sat in the chair, I was just so fascinated that I could physically feel, like under my feet and the vibration in the chair, you could just feel like movement. And I just said to whoever was sitting to me, wow, I could feel like cars and different things moving under me. Like, I was just fascinated that I could actually feel things. Like, because at that point, I just thought when you went to heaven, you were just a celestial being and you'd be just floating and you wouldn't have any association or whatever. But I just recognized things, is what I'm saying. And it was like everything was intensified, my feelings and stuff. So while I'm sitting there and just fascinated by that, I heard like voices coming from a distance, like they were coming from a far place. You couldn't really distinguish a lot of it, but they were coming from a far place. But I recognized them as being prayers, praises. I could tell that they were coming. So I knew they were coming from the earth. But I remember hearing a lady sing, and she was the loudest thing. It was like she echoed in heaven. Her voice was really loud in heaven. It was like she was coming from far away, but in heaven it was like amplified and it was loud. And I remember thinking, because she was singing a song. It was an elderly lady singing a song. And I remember, this is what I recall. I recall saying, wow, I remember that song. I'm speaking to this person who's sitting next to me. I remember that song on the earth. But ooh, she does not sound good. She is not melodious. That's what I said. And then the angel that was in the classroom setting appeared out of nowhere. And he said, all songs and prayers and praises are sweet smelling savor unto the nostrils of God. And that's what he said. And I was like, oh. So I didn't say anything more about that, but I just could hear her echoing. And then all of a sudden, I saw the image. I couldn't physically tell you I saw it, but I saw an image of God doing this. It was like he was bent down like this. His head was down, and he did like this. And it was like he was taking a huge, gigantic sniff. And he just breathed. And when he breathed, it was like he was breathing in, like almost like he was smelling roses, like he had a scent in his nose. It was like he had just laid his head back, and the scent was so sweet to him, and he was laid back. His head was laid back, and it was though he was enjoying whatever it was he was smelling. And then it hit me, and I realized that whatever they were doing, the lady singing and all those prayers and praises coming up, they were like incense to him. So, like I said, the lady was really loud. What I recognized about her was whatever she was singing, it was from the heart. Nothing that came up to heaven, nothing that was amplified in heaven, and all those prayers and everything came up to heaven. Nothing could even enter break the hemisphere if it wasn't from the heart. Whatever wasn't from the heart didn't even break the atmosphere, never made it to heaven. But everything that was pure and of the heart was like echoes in heaven. It was echoing. And whatever that lady was singing, whatever she was singing was pure worship, and it was being like absorbed and brought in like praise, like smelling savor, incense or roses to the nostril of God. So anyway, we moved on from that setting. I mean, we sat there, and I remember looking over and then recognizing a classmate of mine. And I see her on Facebook, but I've written this in my book, but I've never released her name, and I'm not going to ever release that name. I'm not going to ever tell, because it's between me and God. That I promise to keep. But I saw her. And the thing that made me think about her, I can't say if it was because she's still alive. She's not dead. And I know it's a her. But I recognized her because as soon as I saw it, I started to cry. I said, oh my God, she made it. And I remember just being elated because it was someone I recognized in heaven. The revelation I got about that, or from that, was the fact that we are going to be surprised who makes it in heaven and who doesn't. And that's just a nugget. I'm just sharing that. But I remember, because as far as I know, I don't see her as being a Christian at this point and stage in her life. So to see her was very shocking. In heaven, 24 years ago, I had this dream. So anyway, and then other issues, there was not other issues, but I began to see us, and we began to worship. And when we began to worship, it was like we just shot up, like just really huge and large. We just shot up. And all of a sudden I was out of the dream, back in my body. And I remember trying to share that with my husband at the time, and he rolled over. When I said it to him and I told him the dream, and he didn't even remember it. My first husband, he looked at me, and it was just because he heard me. I got up out of the dream. I was physically crying when I got up out of the dream, and I had one hand raised up. And when he'd asked me, well, you okay? What's wrong? I started to tell him the dream, but I was blubbering so much I could barely talk, because I was like, and I was trying to tell him, and I couldn't talk. I barely could talk. And he just looked at me and rolled back. He looked at me and said, don't cast your pearls before swines. And then he rolled back over and went to sleep. I was like, okay. But it wasn't to share with him. That dream wasn't something that God had me to share with him. And I think a few years later, God had me reveal the dream to whom he had me reveal the dream to, which was my oldest daughter's father. And he and I were engaged at one point in time, and we still had we still had a friendship. God had blessed us that we still had a friendship. And I remember revealing it to him and telling him. But I had no clue that when I told him that 2 years later he would have died. So I told him that 24 years ago. So he passed 22 years ago. So it was just amazing. So anyway, how I got to that part is the fact that when I heard this song, because I know it sounds like I'm going off track, but when I heard this song, Everything You Touch Is a Song, it brought back that lady. And that was the thing. When I got out of the dream, I could not remember that song. I remembered every detail. I couldn't remember the questions, and I couldn't remember the song that old lady was singing. But I did recognize it, and I knew it was a song that we sang on earth, because I said it to the person sitting next to me, that I recognized that song. We used to sing that song on earth. And this day when I'm here sitting in this room, listening to the birds, listening to that particular song in worship with God, I finally got the revelation after 24 years of what that lady was singing. She was not singing. It was not a particular song. That's why I couldn't remember her song. That's why it wasn't for me to know her song. That's why it wasn't for me to reveal her song, because that song was an express form of her worship. It was her life story. It was her song. It was the thing that she sung. It was her experiences. I recognize it because it sounds familiar of some things I went through, but I could not sing her song. I have my own unique song. My life is a song. My life is a testimony. My life, my worship, my praise, my experiences, it's all a beautiful symphony. It's all a beautiful song. That was the revelation I got, that her song was not to be remembered by me because it was her express worship and her express song that went only to God. And it was a worship. It was loud in heaven. It rang and it echoed in heaven. That was the thing that touched me. And I began, because it was like what I was hearing outside. I was hearing the bird, but I was telling my friend how when I was listening to the birds, I could almost tell that there was some that was really loud, and then there was some that was really softer, and there was one that was particularly louder. So I actually sat and listened to these birds sing, but I could tell the ranges and the difference, that one was closer to me and some were further away, but they were singing, and some was chirping a little bit louder, and then there was a different type of chirp. But that's because they all have their unique praise and song to God. And I want to say this because I'm sharing this in this particular season. The reason why I'm sharing this now is because there's this time of year during the Christmas and during some of these holidays, people tend to get in a place where they're depressed and they're suicidal and different things that's going on. I'm going to be honest with you. One thing that I realized about that lady singing her song, it was her life story and her testimony. You see, we all have a unique song. We all have a unique praise. My praise will never be your praise. My praise was not her praise. That's why I didn't know her song, because it was her personal testimony to God. My praise will never be your praise, but your praise is so unique to God. That's why you have no right to take your life, because your life is a testimony that God loves you. Your life is a song, it's a symphony. And if you take your life, you're cutting it off prematurely. You're cutting off the symphony, the music, the song. Because see, the thing about that lady 24 years ago, I couldn't recognize or see her song. It was familiar, but I couldn't sing it. I couldn't remember it coming out of the dream because I still had life to live. That was 24 years ago. I still had 24 more years before I would have lost my husband and have to say that now I'm in a place of beauty for ashes. I had to go through some things. I had to go through some really bad things. I lost everything. I'm in a place right now where we just had a storm. I've evacuated. I'm not now residing in Texas. And I lost a lot of things in my house, a lot of my clothes, a lot of personal things. Every single thing that my husband and I, the last few things that I kept and salvaged and kept, were certain personal things to us. Almost pretty much everything that we got together that were just important to me is gone, is lost from the storm. And I could very well just be depressed, and I'm not going to lie and say that the enemy wasn't trying to bring that upon me. I don't have my home anymore. I don't have the things that me and my husband enjoyed and worked hard and built. Certain things I just had to release and let go. Certain people I had to release and let go. I could honestly say I could very well be down and depressed, but you know what? Like the birds, you see, like the birds, they have a song to sing. I realized that through my testimony, through all the things that I've gone through, that's part of who I am. That's part of my story. That's part of my song. Like that lady in heaven, she was singing, and it echoed in the heavens because she was singing her praise and worship to God, and it was all about her life story. And I want to be here and now, even in 2020, when everybody's ready to write this year off. I wouldn't say that, because I opened this year, began this year, entering into Jerusalem, my dream trip, the place I've always wanted to walk the streets Jesus walked, to witness the things, the places, and I got that opportunity. And I'm grateful and thankful, because even now that I'm going through certain things, I am yet in the best place of my life, because I'm in a place of worship. I'm in a place of gratitude. I'm in a place of praising God. I sing of his goodness and his mercies and his grace. And God has just blessed me. He's blessed me. I'm an author. I never thought I would be an author. I never thought I'd be half of the things that I ended up, a businesswoman and all of that. That's a blessing from God. I never knew, but it took that part of my story from my husband's death that catapulted me to the next area and stage of my life. Now I'm going to be an author of multiple books, because I'm in the process of finishing off a second one and a third. Thank God for that. Now that's to be continued, because I'm looking forward to having this done in 2020. So I'll let you all know. And I thank God, because my entire life is a testimony. In everything, I give thanks. This is just an admonishment to you, my brothers and sisters, that in everything give thanks. Let this be a season. This is the last of 2020. I know there's been so many deaths and so much things that we've gone through, but at the end of the day, even through your losses, I know what it's like to lose. I know what it's like to lose a person that's your everything, and feel like after you've lost them, you no longer have anything left. I know what it's like to feel that way. I know what it's like to feel so down and so broken and heartbroken. I know what it's like to feel like that. But I'm grateful and thankful to God, because he knew my story didn't end there. My song didn't end there. My dance with him didn't end there. I just wanted to share this story with you, and I hope that it touches somebody, because just to let you know, honestly, your song is not yet over. Your symphony has yet to be sung. You're like that bird out there that's singing. You might, and sometimes the bird's wings get broken, so they may not be able to be as strong and sing as strongly, but they still have a song. As long as you have breath, as long as you have life, you have a song in you. So I just want to continue to keep you in prayer and inspire, and just give you a word of encouragement. In heaven, let your voice echo. Let your praise be so loud that when God hears it and the angels hear it, they all rejoice, and they realize that it is a sweet smelling savor unto the nose of God, that he could lean back and he could be so pleased, and it's like a aroma to him. Let your worship, let your life story, let your song sing loud. I choose to sing loud. Live loud. I love you. Y'all have a blessed night.